I thank the honourable member. The question is that the motion be agreed to. I give the call to the honourable member for New England.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I rise to also add my condolences to those who have spoken so well about the life of former Prime Minister Bob Hawke. I was privileged enough to be invited by Blanche J to the funeral of Bob. Obviously, Bob didn't invite me, something can be said about the way the Labor Party sends off one of their champions. It was an incredible event, and I just want to put on record the endorsement that was given by so many. Probably the most memorable speech was that of Kim Beazley, which really encapsulated the strength of his friend and colleague. It was also good to see at that service the capacity for old adversaries to be brought together, and the reception that was given to the former Prime Minister Paul Keating also made sure that an adornment of that service was that bringing together of the ends to once more make a circle, so that there would be a sense of parting, and that started the way their relationship between Keating and Hawke, the way it commenced, which was one of friendship. As a man from border town in South Australia, Bob Hawke had the capacity to encapsulate both the urbane and also the regional, and this carried him well through his career. As also a Rhodes Scholar, as so many other former people, Kim Beazley, Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull, he was always someone who, when people watched him on television and saw him from a distance, as people in the country did, had a sense of pride, because he was a person who was obviously had an intellect, a strong intellect, and this was conveyed through a larrikin persona, but nonetheless that intellect gave people a sense of pride in his capacity to connect, especially to world leaders such as President Bush. Because when people observed from a distance, they could see that there was a real affinity, a real connection, that Australia, through the voice of Bob Hawke, had a capacity to reach out to other major players in the world and make us as one, and not to make us look as an appendage, but a person who walked up on level ground with these global leaders. Also, he no doubt made Australia grow up. For so long we had a sentimentality towards England, an attachment towards England, which obviously in the time that Bob Hawke came about was becoming a bit of an anachronism, and we had to make some of those changes. The most notable one was the Australia Act, which of course cut ties to the Privy Council, which, when you think about it, in 1983 was pretty ridiculous. The idea that you're going to go sit on a woolsack in London somewhere and make an appeal about an issue in Australia was rather absurd. And I think Bob Hawke, even though there was a sense that things should remain as they were, Bob Hawke had the capacity to shake the nation and say it's time to move on a bit. We can stand on our own 2 feet now. Would Bob Hawke survive today? Probably not. It's what we also see is in the advent of mobile phones and the advent of a 24/7 media, and the advent where this has turned more into sort of cheap daytime television than politics in some instances, the capacity of a person with the credentials of Bob Hawke, but also the colour of Bob Hawke, would make it hard asked as to whether he would survive. I noted one of the articles by Phil Curry where he sort of disputed that, and I would say that it is a shame that in the world has passed where the John F. Kennedys and the Eisenhowers and the Bob Hawkes would actually be able to survive in a 24/7 media spotlight. And what that meant for places like Australia is we wouldn't have had a person like Bob Hawke, and we wouldn't have had what he did for Australia, which was create an epiphany about a greater realisation that we can stand on our own 2 feet and be proud of who we are. In closing, I'd just like to give my own experiences of Bob Hawke. I found him to give sage advice. I had the pleasure of meeting Bob Hawke a number of times, And the one thing that is not just specific to Bob Hawke, but to a number of politicians, as people ascend the political, their political mountain, their political Mount Sinai, they go up as purists, they go up as absolutists, they go up with this sort of fervent belief. But once they can see the vision and the view from the top, they descend more as realists. They descend more as people who can see and give credit to the strengths of both sides of the political fence. We're probably more honest in their political views, and can sit you down, as I did with Bob. And I remember it once at a lounge in Beijing, and give you an honest appraisal of how politics, and give you advice as if they were on your side of the political fence. So they're doing it with their best intentions at heart, and to try and, on your behalf, see politics through the eyes of people on your side and try to point what they think were pertinent points, pertinent issues out to you. That is about it, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'd like to convey, as everybody has, to the family of Bob, my deepest sympathies. Posthumous, even though she's passed, I'd like to also once more commend the great work that Hazel did and how greatly loved she was by the Australian people. And also I'd like to commend the great care and love that was given by Blanche Dalpouget to Bob, and that was something that I noted personally in her discussions with Vicky over the last part of Bob's life, and that she really was a person who stepped up to the mark and made sure that the final parts of his life were one of dignity, one of continued involvement with his great love of politics and other parts of life, and obviously crosswords and other things he did on his front veranda or front porch. And so to her, I'd also like to commend her and thank her for the work that she did. As I think Kim Beazley said when he was closing, that we're not quite sure where Bob finished in regards, he was an agnostic, but where he resided at the end, no one will ever know. I suppose it's the same for all of us. But Kim Beazley, as he said in his eulogy, he said he was absolutely certain that a person with the character of Bob Hawke would be taken into the arms of our Lord and looked after.